What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Going from zero to producer in 90 days with Ableton Live. I'm your instructor, Torbjorn, and a big thanks to Ableton Live for extending their free trial out to 90 days. We're going to take this opportunity while we're all in isolation to upgrade our brains with some good music knowledge. Today is all about drums and the drum rack instrument in Ableton. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. Quick review of what we talked about last time. We were getting into some recording stuff. We talked about signal flow with our audio interfaces. We were talking about monitoring and buffer size to get rid of that delay that sometimes happens in your headphones when you're recording. Talked about recording to audio tracks, and then we recorded some random percussion stuff, and I recorded some guitar loops, and we put a little beat together with that. So the thing that we did is we sequenced the beat by chopping up an audio clip and putting it on a bunch of different audio tracks and making a drum beat that way. But I think there's an easier way that people find to do that, and that thing is called drum rack. Ta-da! Drum rack is a MIDI instrument that comes with Ableton, and you play it with the piano roll or your MIDI controller or whatever, but instead of different keys on your piano MIDI controller triggering different pitches, it instead, with drum rack, triggers different samples. Let's take a look. I've got a MIDI track right here with the drum rack on it. This is a blank one, but we're going to go ahead and grab some presets here from the drums menu. Go ahead and start with our 808 core kit, pretty classic. Make sure that my MIDI keyboard is on my computer keyboard, and normally this would, like with a piano sound, trigger C, D, E, F, G, whatever our notes are. But here in this case, it's going to trigger a kick drum, a snare drum, we've got a clap, toms, hi-hat, all from one instrument, which is super handy. You can see next to all of these different cells that we've got a bunch of different banks that go up. So we're just looking at octave 1 C, but it goes all the way up here from the top, octave 8, all the way down to C -2. So you can imagine that gives you all the keys on the piano. That's great. So we've got ability to make drum patterns with a MIDI clip. A lot of the same things apply. We're talking about racks, and if you remember from our last video, we learned a little bit about instrument racks and audio effects racks. Well, the same things apply. We can hit this hot swap button. We can plug in a different kit. Give us some little previews here. So we can plug this dirty kit in, and you probably noticed listening to some of those kits that some of them had like non-drum sounds in them. Well, the reason is because if you look in these cells, each one of these things is a simpler instrument. So it's like a bunch of different simpler instruments. And instead of playing different notes, it just plays a different sample. So all of the same stuff that we learned about simpler, the different modes, classic, one shot, and that's what we're using in drum rack to control these samples. Cells are kind of like chains. If we open up the chain menu, which is something that we got in our instrument racks as well as our audio effects racks, you can see we get different chains. We also get our macros, so we can map different macros to different controls. A lot of these preset kits have these macros filled out for you already, which is really nice. We get I/O, we get sends, all kinds of crazy stuff with drum racks. And we'll dig a little bit deeper over the course of several future videos. But for now, the important thing to know is that if you have a blank drum rack, all you got to do is grab some samples. Like we can do a browser search here for kick. We can scroll through our different kick samples till we find one we like, and you just click and drag it into a cell. And then now you can play that sample. Let's find a clap. like that one. And then let's find a hi-hat as well. I like those short kind of trappy sounding ones that come from the 808 kits. All right. Let's take a look at making a basic MIDI clip with one of these. So same thing as any other MIDI clip. We're just going to select a moment of time on our arrange window. Command-Shift-M to create that clip. And now down here on the bottom, we're looking at our clip view. So it just gives us the 3 sounds that we have. I would say a great step one, like intro to understanding drums, is to know that like in most pop music, what makes up drum patterns is just a kick and a snare playing back and forth. So if we look at like, we've got 2 bars of music here and we've got 4 beats in each one of these bars. I'm going to go ahead and put a kick on beat 1 of each bar, and I'm going to go ahead and put a clap on beat 3. And then I'm going to fill in each one with a hi-hat. And I'm just double clicking. If you press the B key on your keyboard, you'll get a pencil tool. And you can do it with just 1 click. Let's go ahead and set our tempo to 100 and just listen back to that. Kick and clap, kick and clap. So that's at 100 BPM. We can go ahead and push this up and we'll start to recognize that it changes the vibe a lot, even though the drum pattern is not changing. We can add more hi-hats. If we filled in equal distance between each one of these spaces and add some more hi-hats, we'll get like the same overall pulse, but it's going to feel faster because there's more notes. If we were to just duplicate all of them, fill all the spaces, then we're going to really start to get this like trappy, up-tempo sound. We can fill in with more kick drums. You get the idea. All we're doing is just filling in space between that initial kick and snare. Well, let's dive in a little bit more to drums and tempo and understand a little bit about what all of that stuff means. In modern pop and dance music, the tempo of your song, which is a number, also referred to as the beats per minute, and the notes and the rhythms that you play with your drums, those 2 things are going to impact the genre of your song a lot. Like, almost to the point where it kind of doesn't matter what else you do. If your song's at 120 beats per minute and it's got a kick drum on all 4 beats, it's going to feel like house or funk or disco or those types of music that have those drum patterns. So I just wanted to show a couple examples of that, and we'll listen to some stuff at some different tempos so that you can hear how, like, even within that same genre, a different tempo can really change the feeling or mood of the music. So let's look here. This is like a lo-fi, old school hip hop vibe. Some people might call this a boom bap or a boom clap beat. Lo-fi hip hop beat at 70 BPM. I've got a sample on here and it's set to repitch. So we're going to kind of recontextualize this background sound, but just try to pay attention to the drums. I'll open this up and take a look at all our drums. These are some drum samples from a J Dilla drum pack. Kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. And you'll notice what makes this type of beat interesting is a lot of the samples and sounds are triggered off beat. So you can see this hi-hat is pretty consistently late. It's behind all of the kicks and the snares. This shaker sound is a little bit early. If you look down here at our grid, we're looking at a triplet grid. If you right-click, you can change between quarter, 8/16 16th notes, or you can turn that triplet grid on in addition. And instead of seeing groups of 4 notes, it'll have groups of 3 notes. And so it's just an easy way to like get some extra unique spacing. That was at 70 BPM. Let's take a listen at 85 BPM and see how that changes. So obviously we're getting that sample is going up in pitch, which is changing the mood quite a bit. But those faster drums really is the focus. And it all of a sudden it starts to change the mood. I've heard some beats like this all the way up to 100 BPM on the fast side. So let's listen to what that might sound like at a higher tempo. So faster drums, higher pitched samples, kind of the vibe that I'm getting is it's just a little more uplifting and a little more positive sounding. There's some examples of that lo-fi hip-hop sound. Let's move on here to some like more club hip-hop, or some people call this trap. Kind of confusing because trap is also a genre in EDM. I think club is a better way to say it. Club hip-hop or some trap rap. On the low side, you'll hear these around 120 beats per minute. Different style of drum samples here and just a different pattern in general. So like the hi-hat sounds get really short and ticky, and you can see in a couple spots here, we've got them like really, really close together, all of these notes that give that stutter kind of like machine gun sound. The kicks and snare samples, we've kind of gotten away from that traditional sounding live drum kit, and we're using just digital sounds that came from a synthesizer. And of course, what really makes this club hip-hop and trap rap music what it is, a big old 808 bass on the bottom. So that's at 120. Let's bump it up to like 135, and let's hear what this sounds like a little bit faster. Again, just like more energy. It's feeling like that dramatic feeling is getting more intense. And I think in this style of music, sometimes you hear this all the way up at 150 BPM. Let's take a listen on the high side to what that type of energy feels like with this drum beat. These type of songs, this like club rap music, the stuff that's 140 BPM to 150 BPM tends to get played on the dance floor more because the energy tends to be higher. So depending on what type of song you're writing, think about where you want that song to be played as well. Slower stuff might lend itself better to like a movie soundtrack or something focusing on the lyrics. Moving on, we've got the house beat. This is an interesting beat. It gets associated in the dance music world with house and techno and sometimes with electro. But really it comes from like disco and funk music. And it's just 4 kick drums all on every beat and some hi-hat or some percussion in between that and the snare. Pretty simple beat. Let's take a listen. I've got like a little funk guitar sample over it here for context. You'll hear this stuff commonly play from like 95 to 130 BPM in the dance music world. So let's start at 95. This type of stuff, you could imagine like Sly and the Family Stone, some like 70s funk or 70s disco stuff, all the way up to more modern artists that have this kind of sound. Like Anderson .Paak is a great example of someone that uses this beat on the slower like 95 to 105 tempo range. Let's bump it up to 110 and take a listen to that. Kind of uptown funk, Mark Ronson vibe. Make a dragon wanna retire, man, I'm too hot. You get the idea there. All the way up to the high end of dance music, the high end BPM range of house dance music. There's like a running joke in the EDM producer world that like 128 BPM, that's the magic tempo, man. Everybody loves it. So let's take a listen at 128. Now we're kind of getting into the range of that beat that is more common with artists like Daft Punk. All right, trap and dubstep, really, really similar drum beats to this club rap, trap rap style. So I didn't create its own example. Dubstep especially, kick and snare back and forth is usually like all you get from the drums in a lot of dubstep music, especially dubstep songs that have synthesizers take up a lot of the space in the songwriting. The kick and snare is like just there to help keep tempo more than for actual like musical purposes, I feel. But it depends on the song and it depends on the producer. Another interesting concept is doubling your tempo. And this first came to my attention when I was working with some drum and bass DJs and collaborating with some drum and bass producers. Some people call drum and bass 85 BPM. Some people call it 170 BPM. And it's like the same thing. It's twice the number. But if you think about pulse, if I was to snap this hand 1, 2, 3, 4, but only snap this hand on 1 and 3, the pulse is the same, is what I'm trying to say. So let's give an example of that using Ableton. I'm going to set this to 85 BPM. I've got a drum and bass synthesizer bass loop, and I've got a little break beat here. Let's take a listen at 85 BPM. So that's at 85 BPM. I'm going to set this to 170. And it might do a couple weird things here with the drums. I might have to drag these out, but it should illustrate the point. 1, 2, 3, 4, pulse, 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 pulse. I'm just going to hit undo a couple times and we'll go back to that 85 BPM one and let's listen again. Pulse, 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 pulse. Hopefully that makes sense. That number being double or half of another number, kind of, it ends up being the same song in the end. Wanted to show another cool trick. One of the coolest ways that I know how to reverse engineer drum beats and get better at making drum beats by listening to other people's drum beats is using this tool called audio to MIDI. So I grabbed this drum loop. I'm going to set us to 95 BPM. It sounds like this. This is really cool. I like this beat a lot. It's got a simple kick snare back and forth. It's filling that space in between with a couple extra kick drums and a couple hi-hats. But there's something about it, man. Like the swing, the way that those notes are off time from the grid and from the metronome is like really, really cool. And rather than me going in and recreating that by hand in all of the trial and error, I'm just going to add a new drum kit here. I've grabbed this 808 core kit. And all I'm going to do is just drag this audio clip on top of it. You'll see next to my mouse that I get a little musical note icon. And when I let go, it's going to convert it into drums for me. I can look at this. Here's like all of the same notes exactly at the same time as when they got played on the audio clip. Let's solo our 808 core kit and take a listen. It did a pretty good job. So it's not 100% accurate. So you may have to fix a couple things by ear. It works great with drum loops. But if you are trying to grab a specific drum beat from a song that has vocals in it or has other instruments in it, you may have to find a part in the song where there's a drum break. More often than not, this happens at the beginning of the song or at the very end of the song. See if you can isolate that part of the song that just has the drums on it. Clip them off, and then do this same trick that I did here with this loop. Nice and easy way for us to go through here and figure out exactly what's going on with these notes so we can either learn to reproduce it or the hot swap. Let's go through here and find a different drum kit that we can use. That one might be cool. Let's try it out. I actually like that one a lot too. And now that we understand a little bit about how the drum rack works, it might come down to that you just didn't like that one kick sample. And so you can, again, easily go down here to your samples category, go up here on your search bar, type in kick, and let's see if we can just find a different kick that we like a little bit better. That one's pretty good. Click and drag it just onto that cell. It replaces that kick, and now you can customize your drum beat even more. Let's steal that sample here from our lo-fi beat, copy and paste that over here, and take a listen to that in context with another sound. If you right-click here, you've got quantize, or you've got your quantize settings. And what that is going to do is it's going to take your notes and it's going to move them, if they're out of time, to the next adjacent start of a line. In this case, this drum beat was cool because it was out of time. That was like the characteristic that made it interesting. But if we were to get rid of that and just listen to everything quantized like perfectly on an eighth note. So here's with the original timing. And then here's with it quantized. Robot, I'm a robot drummer. As you can tell, quantize can sometimes ruin things. So you got to know when to use it, and you got to know when to lose it. Well, we can quickly talk about loops and variation. Again, this is something we covered in our video about song form, but the same thing applies here on drums. I'm going to make a new beat with this same drum kit. I'm just going to grab one bar of music, Command-Shift-M to make a new MIDI clip. And I'm just going to go back and forth. Let's put our snare on beat 2, kick on beat 3, snare on beat 4. Pretty simple. We can add some hi-hats. Sometimes I like to go in here with the 30-second triplet grid and just drag all my hi-hats so that they're all late. That's pretty good. Let's put one sound here at the end. See if we can find some kind of cymbal or something. There we go. So that's our first bar of music. Now all we're going to do is duplicate this over here on our clip settings. There's a thing that says duplicate loop. Just go ahead and click it, drag it out. Now our 1 bar loop is actually 2 bars. So all we got to do is like change something on the second half. Maybe we don't have this ride cymbal. Maybe we do something here with the cowbell. And then that could be our loop. We could do the same thing again. Duplicate loop. Now we've got 4 bars instead of 2 bars. Stretch our loop out one more time. Same thing. Maybe we're doing something different with our kick drum here. Here's our first half. Cowbell, kick drums. So there we took 1 bar of drum pattern and we made 4 different bars of variation on it. So that's a simple concept and a quick example, but it's a really powerful one, and it's something that I do with every instrument that I compose with, pretty much. And definitely all of my drums and percussion. Same kind of thing as our song form lesson applies here. Every 8 bars, something should be introduced or changed or taken away. You want to make sure that you've got lots of dynamic changes. Loud only sounds loud if there's something quieter in the song to compare it to. And reductive arrangement also works great. If you make 1 4 or 8 bar loop that's really, really busy, you can just duplicate it to other parts of your song. And in those other quieter sections, you can start to remove elements to change those dynamics. Quick review. We were looking over the drum rack instrument, how to click and drag samples onto drum rack. We were talking about how different tempos and rhythms can affect the genre of the song that you're writing. We looked at a little technique called audio to MIDI, where you can just drag drums into a drum rack MIDI track, and it will create that drum pattern for you. And then we just talked about a little bit of drum composition. That's it for another lesson. Hopefully this will get you going, composing some drum stuff at home. Hope you are all out there having a great time producing lots of music. Thanks again to Ableton for extending that free trial. Happy producing, everybody. Peace out.